Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's start the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 8 important articles. We have 4 articles important both for prelims and mains that require a detailed analysis, and 4 small topics which are important for the prelims. So let's get started, but before we begin, if you guys are benefiting from our initiatives, do support us with your comments, your likes, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And also before I start, I have a very important message for 2026 aspirants. Our upcoming batches are aimed at the 2026 attempt. In English medium, the Liberty batch is all set to begin from the 11th of October. So if you wish to enroll for the program, you can avail the offer at just 24,999. So you will get to access live classes by our top educators along with prelims and mains test series and the required material along with one-on-one mentorship. And also if you want to avail a free counseling session, if you want to get in touch with your educators, there is a form provided in the video description for a free counseling session. So if you would like to get in touch with us, do fill the form and we will reach out to you. So with this, let's begin today's discussion by looking at these 2 articles from page number 4 and 8 that is related to disaster management. Just the other day, the Indian Air Force marked its 92nd anniversary and it has been conducting air shows across the country. So the other day, the Indian Air Force conducted a mega air show in Chennai at the landmark place at Marina Beach. The Indian Air Force organized a mega event and close to 1.5 million people were in attendance. The event was a big success, but however, as the event was concluding, a tragedy unfolded in the city of Chennai. Due to poor mismanagement, around 5 people have lost their lives because of heat strokes, because of dehydration caused under the oppressive heat conditions which is often seen in a humid place like Chennai. Hundreds of people were hospitalized and close to 200 people were reported to have fainted during the event itself. Many of them suffered from suffocation as well, from claustrophobia and suffocation, and some were reported with heat stroke related symptoms, and unfortunately around 5 people have lost their lives. So this essentially brings attention to a avoidable tragedy, an avoidable disaster. Such heat stroke tragedies that occur during mass public events has become quite common in India. In fact, just a few years ago in Mumbai, the government of Maharashtra had organized an award event where it had brought in lakhs of people from rural areas, and they had all assembled in an open ground, that too during peak summer, during the peak afternoon heat. And due to the poor organization of the event, the lack of adequate facilities for the audience, several people suffered from heat strokes as a result of excessive dehydration, and eventually many people lost their lives. So many such incidents keep recurring in India, especially during the summer months and sometimes even during the high humid season. So such tragedies, which account for disasters as a result of heat strokes, heat waves, they are entirely avoidable with better planning and better preparedness. So let's take a slightly detailed look at this particular topic. Let's understand why mass public events are a major hazard as far as heat strokes are concerned, especially when there is a heat wave or when the wet bulb temperature is beyond normal. Why do we witness such cases of heat strokes? What really happens to human physiology when our bodies are exposed to such adverse conditions, and how can we prevent the disaster from occurring? That is what we need to learn. See, during peak summer, especially in certain parts of India, in northern and the western parts of India, heat waves are quite common, especially when people are exposed to the excessive oppressive heat during, let's say, 10 a.m. to all the way till 4 p.m., which is often considered the peak of the heat during the summer days. When you have sufficient exposure and if you don't hydrate yourself, if you don't replenish the fluids that the body is losing, there are chances that the body could suffer from severe physiological stress. Our bodies have an internal mechanism, a natural mechanism of moderating the internal body temperature, the core body temperature. We often shed the excess heat through sweating, right? So this is what enables the body to remove the excess heat and maintain the optimum core body temperature. But when a person is exposed to deadly heat conditions and when the person is not getting access to hydration, when you are not replenishing the fluids and the salts, the electrolytes that you are losing through sweating, your body could suffer from a number of stress related factors, physiological stress related factors, which eventually leads to a heat stroke, which could even be fatal. So one initial outcome of such exposure is severe dehydration. When you are severely dehydrated, you can even suffer from nausea, vomiting, you might feel dizzy and confused as well, you might lose your balance, and as the dehydration continues and if you don't receive the right treatment, you might suffer from heat cramps where the muscles start cramping up due to the lack of fluids and the lack of essential salts and electrolytes in the body. And eventually this could proceed to a heat stroke when your internal core body temperature goes above the optimum level. Once the core body temperature overshoots the normal range, it could lead to a potential situation where it could cause multi-organ failure, even leading to cardiac arrest, eventually causing the death of the person. So such incidents have become quite common during the summer months, during heat wave conditions. But even during high humid conditions, when you have relatively high temperature, even in the non-summer months, because for example, if you look at the month of October, it's definitely not a summer month in India. But still then why did these deaths occur at this air show organized by the Indian Air Force in Chennai? So this has to do specifically with the climate of Chennai. So anyone who has been to Chennai or any coastal city in India, you would know that throughout the year, these low-lying areas which are almost at sea level, they not only report high temperatures throughout the year, they also experience very high humid conditions. So this makes the heat even more oppressive. So the temperature measured, which captures both the temperature and the humidity levels, the moisture levels in the atmosphere, is what we refer to as wet bulb temperature. Extreme humidity, or basically very high levels of moisture in the atmosphere, in the air, will prevent your body from sweating. Sweating doesn't occur easily when there is a very high levels of humidity, when the air is saturated with moisture. So even a temperature of 34 to 36 degrees Celsius is enough to induce heat cramps and heat strokes as a result of excessive dehydration. See, generally we associate heat stroke related deaths which arises because of heat waves with temperatures above 40-45 degrees Celsius, which is seen during the summer season. But in a high humid place, even a temperature of 34 to 36 degrees Celsius can become fatal because of excessive dehydration, which is a result of your ability, your body not being able to shed the excess heat through sweating. Excessive humidity blocks the process of sweating, retaining the temperature within the body and shooting up the core body temperature. And eventually this could turn into heat cramps and heat strokes and easily turns fatal if you don't receive the right medical attention. Now, how do we avoid such tragedies? Why do we say that these are avoidable disasters? It's because when you're organizing a mass public event, there should be preparedness. There should be adequate planning to ensure that you prevent such incidents from occurring. So in Chennai, if this incident occurred where several people have lost their lives, many people have been hospitalized, then clearly we need to figure out who's to be blamed. right? Whoever organized the event, who were the stakeholders involved in organizing the event, what else could they have done to prevent the tragedy from occurring? That is what we need to learn from a disaster management perspective. When it comes to disaster management, states always have the primary responsibility to deal with disasters. But of course, the center and the local authorities as well play a critical role. The center supplements the states and the local authorities eventually carry out the implementation. So all the three tiers of the government are very crucial in disaster management. Now, if you look at mass public events, it could be a political rally or a music concert or an air show or a religious gathering. Any such mass public event where lakhs of people, millions of people are likely to assemble, adequate precaution has to be taken by the authorities. So in this case, in Chennai, of course, the Indian Air Force and Defence Ministry were involved in organizing the event. The state government of Tamil Nadu provided all the support to the Indian Air Force to organize the event, and local authorities from police to transport to health and the municipal authorities. They would have all been involved in organizing this event. In fact, to be fair to the Indian Air Force and the Defence Ministry, in the run-up to the event, Indian Air Force had spread enough awareness as well amongst the people in Chennai that they need to take adequate precautions against excessive heat and excessive humidity while they are attending the air show. Given that weather predictions were clearly available, which indicated a temperature range of 34 to 36 degrees Celsius with extreme levels of humidity, alerts had been given out. Awareness had been promoted that the audience have to take precautions. As in, you have to wear loose fitting clothing, light colored clothing. You need to carry an umbrella, have enough water and fluids. These are basic measures that were suggested to avoid such potential consequences. But however, on the ground, the organizers need to create facilities to ensure that the audience have access to water and even healthcare facilities if required. Now, this is where a massive failure has been reported in Chennai. We have seen this happening in case of many other mass public events as well. There would be failure on the parts of the municipal authorities, the health authorities, the state government and the main organizer, in this case the Indian Air Force and the Defence Ministry. Reports coming from Chennai have indicated that adequate health and first aid facilities were not available. In an event attended by 1.5 million people in a stretch of around 2 to 3 kilometers, right, it would have been a tightly packed space. So the audience who attended have reported that there weren't adequate health facilities and first aid facilities, and they didn't even find adequate water. There weren't water fountain facilities or water bottles being distributed. And also, after the event concluded, there was complete chaos as far as urban transportation was concerned, which is likely to happen when you have such a large gathering of people. The rail transport, the metro transport completely collapsed. It was overcrowded, leading to congestion, which also contributed to the slow exit of people from the venue, leading to more exposure in the high heat, high humid condition that led to this situation. The municipal authorities had failed to bring in adequate volunteers to help the people, especially senior citizens and those who are suffering from dehydration and the related consequences. So this essentially marks a collective failure of the center, the state and the local authorities. The main organizer, Indian Air Force Defence Ministry, will have to share the blame with the state government, which is primarily responsible for disaster management. Local authorities, including the police, transport authorities, municipal and health authorities, are to be blamed as well for failing to create the right facilities. So the government has claimed adequate precaution was taken, but eventually the disaster did happen, meaning the accountability has to be brought in. Those who are responsible for failing in disaster management should be held accountable to ensure we prevent such tragedies from recurring. Because such heat stroke related deaths at mass public events are completely avoidable with the right planning and right preparedness. So this is what we learn from this important development, and you can expect a mains question based on this. So let's see what kind of question can be asked. Deaths due to heat strokes at mass public events is an avoidable tragedy. Elucidate. So it's a very straightforward question. So what you can do is you can start your answer with an introduction. Maybe you can highlight recent incidents where such disasters were reported. You can cite the example of the incidents in Chennai, Mumbai, etc. So that could be one of the introductions you can provide, or you can talk about heat strokes in general. How excessive heat accompanied with humidity is a contributing factor to heat strokes, which is a potentially fatal condition. You can explain the internal physiology and how the human body takes a toll when you are exposed to excessive heat and humidity, and if you are not replenishing the fluids lost, and if you are not replenishing the electrolyte levels. So that could be an introduction as well, where you are providing a technical introduction to the topic of heat strokes. Then in the body, discuss how this is a preventable tragedy. You need to take a clear stand. You need to show your opinion and point out that this is entirely preventable if there is adequate preparedness and planning by all the authorities, by all the stakeholders from central to state to local governments. If they take the right measures, such disasters are entirely preventable. Then you can go on to list the various measures needed to be taken up under preparedness and planning, from adequate healthcare first aid facilities to early warnings and awareness, to even creating water facilities and cooling stations where people who are suffering from excessive heat, right, they can cool down, they can replenish themselves with water and fluids and electrolytes. So creating those facilities is essential, and also managing the exit in a smooth manner is extremely essential to avoid congestion. So list out all these measures that we discussed and then conclude your answer. Conclude by saying that such tragedies are totally avoidable, but due to poor planning and preparedness, we have seen many such tragic events in the country. So you should suggest that there should be utmost priority given by the authorities to planning and preparedness when it comes to organizing a mass public event, and that basically concludes your answer. Now coming to the next article on page number 8, we have another interesting and important column related to marital rape. The topic of marital rape has been in the news because there is a petition at the Supreme Court challenging marital rape exemption which is provided under India's criminal laws. In this ongoing case, the centre has presented an argument in favor of excluding marital rape from being treated as a criminal offence. So this ongoing debate has generated a controversy in the country. In fact, there is a long-standing demand in India to treat marital rape as a serious criminal offence on par with rape as defined under the criminal laws of India. So let's see what the law says about marital rape, that is rape essentially which could occur within the institution of marriage, where a husband could forcefully have sexual intercourse with his partner against the will, the wishes of the partner. So this is what is treated and considered as marital rape, a rape occurring within the institution of marriage. There are few countries which do consider marital rape as a criminal offence on par with rape under other criminal provisions. But in the case of India and many other countries as well, marital rape is not seen as a criminal offence. Now, if you look at the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, which has replaced the Indian Penal Code, you have section 63, which provides for an exception. The Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita deals with rape, and under section 63 clause 2 there is an exemption given to marital rape. It says that if a man is alleged to have sexual intercourse or engage in acts of sexual intimacy with his partner within the institution of marriage, and if the wife is an adult, if the wife is not a minor, then this is not treated as rape. It is not treated as a punishable criminal offence. So basically, Section 63 exempts marital rape from the provisions of the law. So rape occurring within a marriage is not treated in India as a punishable criminal offence. It's not treated on par with rape in case of two strangers or who might be in an intimate relationship who are essentially unmarried. So there is this clear distinction that exists, and the center has supported the exemption of marital rape from the criminal provisions. But activists, civil society activists, women activists, they point out that this is a gross violation of fundamental rights. They point out that not treating marital rape as a punishable criminal offence on par with other types of rape that happens between strangers or between people who are intimate is a violation of human rights and fundamental rights. It's a violation of gender rights, according to the activists. So let's see where the debate stands, what is the argument of the central government, and let's bring out the viewpoint of the writer, the author of this column. In this ongoing case of the Supreme Court, one important argument made by the centre against treating marital rape as a criminal offence is that the government says there is a clear difference between married women and unmarried women. There is a clear distinction or a differentiation between married and unmarried women. Now let's understand this argument presented by the legal counsel of the central government. The centre has argued that within the institution of marriage, when a man and a woman get married, there are certain expectations from the marriage, that both the partners should love and respect each other, they should take care of each other, take care of the family as well. These are unwritten rules of marriage, unwritten expectations. So according to the government, the societal norm is that within the institution of marriage, there is an expectation of reasonable sexual access. Meaning, when you are married to your partner, you are anticipating a reasonable sexual access, which is an essential need for a human. Be it for the man or the woman, the institution of marriage creates a reasonable access to have sexual intercourse with the partner. So this expectation is something that needs to be fulfilled, that needs to be upheld by the other partner according to the interpretation of the government. The government says this is the norm, the societal norm. The government treats the institution of marriage as a sacred institution which forms the very basis of our society. So the government has argued that in a marriage there is a reasonable expectation from both partners to satisfy each other sexually as well. Whereas if you look at those who are unmarried, or let's say there are two strangers involved in a rape case, a victim and the abuser, who are not known to each other, who are strangers, or let's say the victim and abuser are known to each other, or they might already be in an intimate relationship. They might be partners, live-in partners, they might be boyfriend, girlfriend. So in such cases, if rapes occur, it is outside the institution of marriage. So that relationship doesn't have the sanctity or the sanction of the society according to the government. And this has a role to play in treating marital rape as an exemption to criminal provisions. So to understand this, the petitioners were arguing that if married, unmarried women are treated differently, that would be a violation of Article 14, which guarantees right to equality. Imagine there are two rape incidents which have occurred. In one case, the victim is unmarried, and the unmarried rape victim can seek justice, can seek punishment for the offender. Whereas, imagine in the other case, it's a married woman who has suffered from rape from her own husband, and she won't be able to seek justice because marital rape is not treated as a criminal offence. So there is a clear distinction in the way in which the law treats married and unmarried women when it comes to rape related offences. So the activists are pointing out that this is a breach of Article 14. It violates a right to equality. It's creating a distinction amongst women between married women and unmarried women. But the centre says that within the institution of marriage, there are expectations, and this is a reason enough for the law to make a distinction between married women and unmarried women. So this is a controversial position being taken by the government of India. It is criticized and opposed by the women activists. But the government says that when there is reasonable sexual access within the institution of marriage, how do you determine that marital rape has occurred? It might become challenging to establish the case or even prove the case. Or if such a law were to be brought in where marital rape is considered as a punishable criminal offence, the government says this could lead to false cases, false charges. Given that the two partners are already involved sexually as part of the institution of marriage, given that in marriage there is reasonable sexual access, what if tomorrow the partner alleges that the husband has committed a rape after having sexual intercourse with consent? So based on this point, the government argues that there is a legal basis, a valid legal basis to consider married and unmarried women distinctly under the law, given that within marriage there is a reasonable sexual access, which makes it difficult to establish marital rape. If the provision were to be provided, it might even lead to abuse, misuse of the law. This is the stand taken by the centre. But the writer counters this argument of the government. The writer correctly points out, now who is to define what constitutes reasonable sexual access within a marriage? The writer accepts that yes, within a marriage, yes, definitely there are expectations from each other's partners. That includes a sexual expectation as well to satisfy your sexual needs. But isn't this very subjective? Reasonable sexual access within marriage, isn't this very subjective? What are the parameters? Does it mean that the partner can expect any kind of sexual favor within the marriage? So these parameters are not defined. It's very vague, it's very subjective. And the writer challenges the government on this point. Also, the writer presents another important argument. See, eventually the Constitution of India upholds your bodily autonomy, which includes your sexual reproductive autonomy. The Constitution guarantees right to dignity under Article 21. This is clearly upheld as your fundamental right to have autonomy over your body, which includes the decision to have sex or to not have sex with another person or another partner. Now, doesn't this trump expectation from a marriage? This is the argument the writer is making. Even within the institution of marriage, the writer is batting for consent when it comes to sexual access. The writer says this is a result of a patriarchal society where women are expected to meet the sexual needs of the man, and even if that leads to forceful sexual intercourse or essentially rape within the marriage, it is often deemed as within the sanctity of the institution of marriage, as marriage is supposed to provide reasonable sexual access. But the writer says, doesn't the constitutionally guaranteed fundamental right of dignity, the right to lead a life with dignity, the right to bodily autonomy and sexual autonomy, isn't this a fundamental right that could easily trump expectation within a marriage? Now, the government has argued in the court that if marital rape is made a punishable criminal offence and treated on par with other rapes, this could erode the institution of marriage, which could destroy the Indian society. This is the argument of the centre. The legal counsel of the centre has presented this argument. But the writer says that what kind of an institution is it? What kind of sanctity is there in a marriage if the husband is raping the partner? The writer says this is a result of the historical gender-based bias in the society, the patriarchal orthodox nature of the society, which enables women to be mistreated within marriage. But however, the government does have a valid point when it says that the law could be misused. Definitely the law could be misused. Within marriage, it might be very difficult to establish and prove the incident of a marital rape. But the writer has a very good counterpoint to this. The writer says that, see, any law could be potentially misused. For example, you take the laws related to dowry. Dowry laws have been misused in several instances, but does that mean we can't have a law to deal with dowry related offences? Eventually, it is the courts that will determine. There is due process followed in the courts, and beyond a certain reasonable doubt, the case will have to be established in a court of law. Any law has the potential to be misused. So this should not be the basis to not criminalize marital rape, according to the writer, which is a very strong argument the writer is making against the point of the government. Also, the government's point that sanctity of marriage as an institution is the foundation of the society has no evidence, it has no basis. This simply shows the orthodoxy and patriarchy which is prevalent not just in the society, in the mindset of the government as well. This argument simply falls apart. There is no rational basis to say that marriage is the foundational basis of a society. Yes, marriage has a certain sanctity between the partners for the families, but such an institution can never be considered as sacred if a partner is raping the wife and if the partner is not facing the law. So this argument falls apart according to the writer, and to counter the government's argument that the law could be misused to file false cases against the husband. Imagine husband and wife, they don't have a good marital relationship, right? And it is possible that after a act of consensual sex, what if the wife files a fake or a false charge against the husband? That is a valid point being raised by the government, but the writer says this is a matter of concern to be established in the court. Now, do you use this excuse in every other case? For example, as I said, dowry laws. Don't we have a law against dowry, even though the law could be misused and has been misused in several instances? Does that mean you simply ignore the issue itself and not have any law against it? Eventually, this will be proven in a court of law. Of course, it will involve the legal trial, but eventually the matter should be left to the courts. Now, another point made by the government is that the judiciary has no locus standi to decide on marital rape. The government has said judiciary should not interfere with marital issues. This is a matter to be left to the legislature. Here the government is again absolutely right. From a legal standpoint, from a constitutional standpoint, it is for the legislature to decide what is a crime and what laws should deal with a crime. But the center makes one argument. The center says marital rape is a social issue, not a legal issue. In the Supreme Court, the center has argued that marital rape is a social issue arising due to crimes against women, the discrimination against women in the society, the patriarchy of the society, but it's not specifically a legal issue. This argument seems absurd to the writer. The writer says every law, every judgment of the court not only has legal ramifications, it has social ramifications as well. Every law that you have, right, almost every aspect of society and social life is already regulated by law, and the courts are passing judgments on that. Now, how can you create this watertight distinction between a social issue and a legal issue? Eventually, both are interconnected. Society influences law, law influences society. So the writer breaks down this argument of the center. The writer eventually says that the government is correct when it says the legislature has to decide the law. The government is absolutely right when it says that only legislature should decide if marital rape should be a criminal offense. But however, the writer makes a very good point. The writer says that the court may not be able to declare marital rape as a criminal offense because it may lack the jurisdiction, right? That would be a case of judicial overreach where the judiciary might step into the domain of the legislature. The writer says that yes, this matter should be left to the legislature. Let the legislature decide if marital rape should be declared a criminal offense or not. But the Supreme Court is well within its jurisdiction to declare marital rape exemption, which is granted under Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, previously under the IPC, as unconstitutional. This is the point the writer is making. Maybe Supreme Court can't order the government and the parliament to bring out a law to treat marital rape as a criminal offense. That would be a overstepping of the jurisdiction. But Supreme Court is well within its jurisdiction to declare the exemption given to marital rape as unconstitutional. Supreme Court has the power of judicial review, which means it can review any law, test it against the constitutional norms. So Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, which provides for this exemption to marital rape, could be struck down as unconstitutional by the courts, and the writer is urging the Supreme Court to do that. Let the Parliament decide whether marital rape should be treated as a criminal offence or not. Let the legal expertise be left to the legislature, but Supreme Court will be well within its jurisdiction to strike down marital rape exemption which is given under Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. So this is what we learn from this important article. Now take up this question, bring out the debate surrounding marital rape exception. Now this being a controversial topic, you need to be balanced. You need to present the argument of the government as well and the argument of the activists as well. So see if you can write an answer to this question based on what we have discussed. Now coming to another important column on page number 8, the writer talks about India's great power relations and how India is rebalancing its ties with global powers. So let's take a quick look at the argument being made by the writer in this column. The writer talks about the ongoing power equation involving US and Western countries on one side, with India being in the middle, with Russia and its allies on the other side. The great power struggle, the great game that we are witnessing in a Cold War 2.0, and the balancing role of India, how India balances the West with Russia on the other side. This is the core focus of this column. So let's dive a little deep into this and understand what the writer is trying to point out. See, recently PM Modi carried out a historic visit to United States to attend the Quad Leaders Summit and cemented the India-US relationship along with the other major maritime democracies of the Indo-Pacific, that is Australia and Japan, which are the members of the Quad. Ever since the Quad grouping was set up in 2017, Quad has always been a diplomatic group focused on enforcing a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific region. So essentially, Quad counters Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific, if not through military methods, at least through diplomatic methods, because India has made it clear that Quad is not Asian NATO, it's not a military bloc, it's a diplomatic grouping. Today Quad has diversified into a trade bloc as well. Quad countries are cooperating in many other areas of economic relations, trade, vaccine development, disaster management, etc. So Quad is this diplomatic group of the major maritime democracies of Indo-Pacific, which are diplomatically countering Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. So this puts India in a difficult spot. China views India as an ally of the West. Over the last 2 decades, China has presumed that India is aligned with US and Western powers. China doesn't understand and appreciate India's autonomous foreign policy. China doesn't look at the principle of strategic autonomy, which has been the foundation of Indian foreign policy for decades. China presumes that India is a Western ally, an American ally, and this puts India in a difficult spot. Even Western powers led by US and even countries like Japan have been pushing India to enter a closer security embrace. They want India to be a close military ally so they can jointly counter China. But India is never in the business of joining military clubs. We don't seek to contain a single country or target a single country. That has never been India's foreign policy approach. So this puts India in a difficult spot where we are dragged between both the sides. Something similar happens between India, Russia and the West. If you look at India's balancing act with US and the West on one side and Russia on the other side, it's a similar balancing act for India. But here the stakes are much higher. See, with China we have hostility. China has been hostile against India. It has been unnecessarily aggressive across the disputed Himalayan border and has even escalated tensions in Ladakh, as we all know. But that is not the case with Russia. Russia is a time-tested, all-weather friend of India. In fact, most Indians, even the Indian government, has a very romantic, idealistic view of Russia or even the erstwhile Soviet Union. This is largely because of the kind of support Soviet Union gave to India during the Cold War period. Now, who doesn't remember the unconditional support offered by the Soviets in 1971 when India liberated Bangladesh, when India was threatened by US and its allies who were favoring Pakistan? It was Soviet Union which stood with India. So this unconditional support and the role Russia has played in India's military modernization has led Indians and the Indian government to hold a romantic view of Russia. Yes, India needs to protect this all-weather friendship, a strategic partnership, but doesn't mean it should come at the cost of closer ties with the West. The writer is calling upon India to be more realistic, more pragmatic, because Russia stands isolated as a result of its war in Ukraine. Now, India has done its best to protect Russia. India has never condemned the Russian aggression in Ukraine. We have bypassed the Western sanctions. In fact, India has even become the largest buyer of Russian oil, thus in a way indirectly fueling the Russian war in Ukraine. But what is important is that along with maintaining the close ties with Russia, it's important to cultivate the West and strike a balance, because not only is Russia isolated as a global power, but Russia has become more dependent on China. And it is the Russia-China nexus that should concern India, that should bother India. The writer says that as the West has cornered Russia and countered and isolated Russia globally, Russia has become more and more dependent on China. Clearly, in the Russia-China relationship, China is a superior partner. There's no doubt about it. In terms of economic strength and even military strength, China is much superior to Russia today. Apart from the nuclear arsenal, China stands out when compared to Russia in every other aspect. Russia depends on China today. Russia depends on the Chinese economy. Russia depends on China's arms and weapon supplies, which is fueling the war. Russia depends on Chinese diplomatic support to counter the West. So this growing Russian dependency on China could be bad news for India, because China will not stop its aggression. China will not stop presuming that India is aligned with the West. China has consistently exerted military pressure and diplomatic pressure on India in the recent past. China has even gone to the extent of siding with Pakistan and shielding Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism. It has allowed Pakistan to use terrorism as a part of its statecraft, as a part of its policy against India, and given the required diplomatic protection even at platforms like United Nations. So this axis which has developed, the Russia-China-Pakistan axis, potentially creates challenges for India. See, historically we have dealt with the China-Pakistan nexus, where China has completely backed Pakistan as a proxy against India. China has not only armed Pakistan and enabled its military modernization, China played a direct role in Pakistan turning into a nuclear weapon state by leaking nuclear secrets and military technology, including ballistic missile technology. China has basically propped Pakistan against India. This is something we have been dealing with. But the dependency of Russia on China is what could create problems, because when the recent Ladakh clashes happened, Russia has not exerted the required pressure on China to protect India. As India has grown closer to the West, there are subtle differences present in the India-Russia relationship. India would still have a romantic view of Russia, look at Russia as a strategic all-weather partner, which is a correct position as well. But we should also be mindful that Russia's dependency on China could force Russia to be neutral or side with China in case of Chinese aggression against India. Russia may not be in a position to stand with India, put pressure on China to protect Indian interests in case of India-China hostilities. And given China's continued backing of Pakistan and the growing Russia-Pakistan relations, there are new challenges emerging for India. Historically, Russia would take a principled position that it would never sell the same weapons to India's enemies, be it Pakistan or China. But today this position is slightly changing. Russia-Pakistan are building close military ties. They are conducting military exercises, and Russia is even considering military exports to Pakistan. So given this shift that is happening, the writer says India needs to better balance these relations. Writer is not asking that India should move away from Russia. No, Russia will remain a time-tested friend. But the writer is asking that India should rebalance its approach towards these powers. So in this regard, the writer appreciates India's role as a potential mediator or at least an interlocutor to help bring the war in Ukraine to an end. As you all know, recently PM Modi has visited Russia and he followed this up with a visit to Ukraine, and India's national security advisor has been on a diplomatic spree. He attended the BRICS NSA meeting in Russia and met with Russian leader Putin. And India has clearly conveyed a peace plan. There is a suggestion from India about a peace process where India could potentially act as an interlocutor or a mediator to bring Russia and Ukraine to the negotiating table. This was followed up by Ajit Doval to a visit to France, where he met with the French President Emmanuel Macron, where the possibility of India acting as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine was discussed. So these are great moves by India according to the writer. The writer says India is positioning itself at the right location between the West and Russia so that we could not only be able to mediate between Russia and Ukraine, but also ensure Russia doesn't rely more on China, to ensure Russia could put pressure on China when necessary for India. But also the writer reminds us that India's role as a possible mediator between Russia and Ukraine might be over exaggerated, because India doesn't have that kind of leverage either with Russia or with Ukraine. We may be able to talk to both the sides, engage with both the sides, which no other country can do, but doesn't mean that India has the leverage to bring Russia and Ukraine to the negotiating table. So the writer presents a more realistic picture as well, but he urges India to rebalance its ties with the West, with Russia and with China as well, to ensure that we derive the maximum benefits. We should ensure that we remain closer to the West, cultivate the relationship without falling under the American trap, because generally American diplomacy is designed to serve the self-interest of the United States and the West. So while being mindful of the Western trap, India should maintain its age-old relationship with Russia without being too romantic about it. Meaning we need to be more pragmatic. Be it US, be it Russia, we need to be more pragmatic. Ensure Russia could be able to pressurize China if China threatens India. Ensure we work with the Quad to bring that pressure on China to respect international law, to force China to respect the rules-based order. It is this rebalancing that is needed in Indian diplomacy, according to the writer. Now let's look at the next article on the front page and also on the editorial page and page 16. We have 3 articles today related to the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine, which was announced yesterday. So let's see who won the Nobel for Medicine for 2024, right? And more importantly, let's understand the discovery which has been awarded, right? Let's look at the science behind this discovery. Victor Ambros and Gary Ruchin, you can see their images over here. They have been awarded the Nobel for Physiology, or the Nobel for Medicine as it is popularly known as, for their discovery of microRNA in the 1990s. 3 decades ago, these two researchers, they led a breakthrough research. They contributed to a major scientific breakthrough by discovering microRNA. MicroRNA plays a critical role in gene regulation. It plays a critical role in gene regulation, and that is what we need to understand. See, if you look at any organism, be it small worms, vertebrates, invertebrates or humans, any species, one of the building blocks of life is the protein structure. How proteins are formed, how proteins are synthesized. This eventually determines the very formation and evolution of the organisms. In 1993, these two researchers were studying the genetic makeup and the protein synthesis in worms, roundworms, and they made a remarkable discovery. They discovered how exactly protein is synthesized, what exactly goes into the regulation of the gene functions. See, when it comes to protein synthesis in any organism, right, protein synthesized in a cell, it happens at the ribosome. This is something you would have studied since your school days. Now, if you look at the protein formation, there are two processes involved: transcription and translation. Transcription and translation. These are the two essential processes that happens in a cell, which eventually leads to the synthesis of a protein, which becomes the building block of life. So in transcription, a cell copies the DNA sequence to produce mRNA, the messenger RNA. This messenger RNA from the nucleus, it moves through the cell fluid towards the ribosome, and it awaits for amino acids to be brought in through the translation process. Under translation, the tRNA, transfer RNA, brings the amino acids to the ribosome, which eventually forms your protein. So both the steps are important, transcription and translation. Now, we didn't know what regulates the formation of the protein structure. How exactly are the proteins synthesized? What regulates that? That wasn't known until 1993. These two researchers established that there is also something called microRNA, which is a gene regulator. It is microRNA which determines post-transcription, post-translation, how the protein structures will be formed, which is the building block of life, not just in roundworms, but they later discovered that this is the process in every organism, including the humans. Initial discovery of 1993 was limited to the study of roundworms. They thought this is a feature seen only in the smaller organisms, but later studies by the same team established by late 1990s that microRNA is the critical element which controls the gene regulation, the protein synthesis process within the cell. Is that clear? So this discovery is a breakthrough discovery because it has many scientific applications. This basically helps us understand the occurrence of cancer, autoimmune diseases, and even diabetes, and even develop treatments for these conditions, or develop preventive therapies as well, because studies have clearly established that the malfunctioning of microRNA, any abnormality in microRNA and protein synthesis, is what leads to all these conditions and diseases. Cancer is linked with the protein synthesis which happens in the cell. Any abnormality with the functioning of microRNA leads to abnormal protein synthesis, which eventually affects the cell formation, leading to formation of cancerous cells. Similar links have been found with diabetes and autoimmune disorders. So the discovery of microRNA not only enabled the scientific community to better understand all these diseases and disorders, but today we are in the process of developing treatments and therapies to prevent or at least cure these diseases and conditions. That is why the discovery of microRNA, which is crucial in post-translational gene regulation, is one of the biggest breakthroughs, scientific breakthroughs, and the researchers have been awarded with the Nobel for medicine. Now coming to the prelim section, let's take a quick look. On page number 6, we have an article referring to a tribal community in Karnataka, particularly in the Nilgiris belt. The article refers to a tribal community called the Jenu Kuruba. The Jenu Kuruba community. See, article itself is not relevant for us. The article refers to a tribal leader from the Jenu Kuruba community in Karnataka who has been awarded for his contribution to local welfare and forest conservation. But what we need to focus upon would be the community itself. Who are the Jenu Kurubas? Where can you find them? What is unique about them? Because it's one of the most important indigenous communities in India. The word Jenu Kuruba is primarily from the Kannada language. Jenu means honey, right? Jenu in Kannada means honey. So Jenu Kurubas are essentially honey collectors. That is their traditional occupation. They are a forest dwelling tribe at one point. Today, most of them have moved out of the core areas of forest. They are settled in the buffer zones. You find this community in the Nilgiris, which stretches across Karnataka, Kerala and parts of Tamil Nadu. They are found in Bandipur and Nagarhole, which are important protected areas. Both Bandipur and Nagarhole are national parks and tiger reserves. And Adjacent to it, you have Mudumulai. Adjacent to that in Kerala, you have Wayanad. In these areas, you find the Jenu Kuruba community, specifically in parts of Kerala, Karnataka. They speak a unique language, the Jenu Kuruba language, which is closely linked with Kodava, and it is seen as one of the dialects of the Kannada language as well. So there are words borrowed from Kannada and Kodava language, with some words from Tamil and Malayalam as well. So this is the native language of the Jenu Kuruba community. They are found in these forested areas, which is a major tiger and elephant habitat. And Jenu Kurubas play an important role in forest conservation. They work with the forest departments, the state governments, to tackle hunting, poaching, encroachment. And they have played an important role in forest conservation in the most critical tiger and elephant habitat of India. So that is why the Jenu Kuruba community is very important. Next, on page number 6, we have an article referring to the World Association of Zoo and Aquarium, or WAZA. It's a global organization which is in the news. The World Association for Zoo and Aquarium has withdrawn the membership of the Delhi Zoo. Delhi Zoo's membership has been suspended by this world body because the Delhi Zoo has failed to follow the code of ethics and the standards established by the World Organization. Apparently, the Delhi Zoo has mistreated an African elephant which has not been taken care of adequately, leading to animal abuse. Following these accusations, the world body has suspended the membership of Delhi Zoo. So let's understand, what is the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums? There can be a basic prelims question based on this. The WAZA is a global NGO. It's a non-governmental organization, an international non-governmental organization, which was established in 1930s, in 1935 at Basel in Switzerland. This was before the Second World War. This international NGO was set up to coordinate with zoos around the world to establish basic standards and code of ethics for looking after the animals in zoological parks and ensure there is cooperation and coordination between zoos around the world. But the functioning of this body was disrupted when the Second World War broke out in Europe. So after the Second World War, it was reconstituted in Rotterdam in 1946. So now it is functioning at the global level, coordinating with zoos and even aquariums and other such ex situ conservation sites. It plays a very important role in giving leadership for animal conservation and for biodiversity environment protection. This organization is also a member of the IUCN. Kindly remember this, it's a member of IUCN. It works closely with important conventions like Convention on Biological Diversity or the CMS Bonn Convention, the Convention on Migratory Species, right? It coordinates with all these important conventions and environment related organizations. It works with the sites to deal with trafficking of endangered species, right? It works with IUCN, Convention on Biological Diversity, Bonn Convention or the CMS Convention on Migratory Species. So thus it's a very important body. It sets the global standards for maintaining zoological parks and aquariums. It also provides accreditation. So zoos and aquariums around the world, they get membership into the NGO by getting accredited. Only those zoos and aquariums which are accredited can coordinate with other zoos and cooperate with the global community. They can receive support as well in conservation efforts. But now that Delhi Zoo is suspended because of its violation of the standards in the code of ethics, Delhi Zoo won't be able to work with the global community and derive the benefits offered through this platform. So that is why WAZA could be relevant for the exam. Next, on page number 9, the Hindu carries a very important infographic that represents the critical mineral reserves that are distributed around the world, which are going to play a key role in energy transition. As you all know, the world is moving away from fossil fuels towards clean energy. So as the world makes this transition, towards clean renewable energy to bring down emissions to meet the climate action targets, we need access to certain critical minerals, from lithium to nickel, cobalt, to copper, chromium, and many others, even graphite. So there are essential minerals which are going to play a critical strategic role in the future economy, and there is a rush between countries to corner these resources. So given this ongoing competition, there could be prelims questions, geography based questions, right, map based questions based on the resource distribution. So you should at least know some of these important minerals and their distribution around the world, and at least remember the top 3 countries for each of these minerals. So it's very factual. So please make a note of this, use an atlas to mark the countries as well, and be prepared for a possible question on this topic. So let's quickly run through each of the mineral which is critical for energy transition and which are the top 3 countries holding the maximum reserves. This is according to latest data from 2023. So when it comes to bauxite, Guinea, Vietnam, Australia are considered to have the highest reserves, with India being in the top 10. Chromium, Kazakhstan, South Africa and India being at the 3rd position. Cobalt, the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, Australia and Indonesia, and India doesn't have sufficient reserves of cobalt. Copper, Chile, Peru and Australia. Because see, Latin American countries, African countries and Australia, they are blessed with most of these reserves. Coming to graphite, China, Brazil, Mozambique. Lithium, Chile, Australia, Argentina. I hope you know Argentina, Chile and Bolivia, they are part of the lithium triangle, right? And India is completely deficient in lithium. There have been some recent discoveries, but domestic production is almost absent. We are heavily dependent on the China dominated supply chains for lithium and most of the other critical minerals. Manganese, South Africa, Australia, China, with India being in the top 10. Molybdenum, China, US and Peru. There are few important minerals where even the US has a dominant presence. Then nickel, which is critical for the batteries, Indonesia, Australia, Brazil. Rare earth minerals or rare earth elements, China, Vietnam, Brazil. Silver, Peru, Australia, Russia. And uranium, which is also a transition fuel, Kazakhstan, Namibia, Canada, then Australia. Until recently, it was said Australia had the 2nd largest reserves after Kazakhstan. But latest data places Namibia, Canada above Australian reserves. So if you can remember these top countries as far as these critical resources are concerned, you should be able to answer any prelims question. Coming to the last article for today, on page 14, there is an article referring to the Free to Think 2024 report. This report measures the degree of academic freedom in a country. It essentially tells you to what extent academicians or professors, teachers within the academic environment have the freedom to speak freely, to bring out articles and research papers freely without being threatened or targeted or being criticized. So this is about freedom of speech and expression within universities, within the academia. Generally, in a civilized, progressive society, there should be complete freedom to academicians to speak about anything, right? Whether you like their views or not, whether you're against the views or not, doesn't matter. Academicians in general, right, in a free open society, they're supposed to have complete academic freedom. But in several countries, there is a threat to academic freedom. It could be from political parties, religious organizations, or radical student based organizations, right? So this is generally a feature of more regressive orthodox societies, where different viewpoints are not tolerated, where there is a lack of tolerance. Now, according to this report, which is a controversial report because Indian government rejects this report, clear? This report is published by Scholars at Risk. Scholars at Risk is a platform, it's a network of the top global universities in the world. Most of the top universities, more than 600 of them, have come together to form this network called Scholars at Risk, SAR. This body publishes the report called Free to Think, meaning you are free to think about anything, speak about anything, teach about anything, publish anything. So on this report, India's ranking has slipped to alarming levels in the last decade, according to the organization. India has dropped from 0.6 points to 0.2 from 2013 to 2023. So over the last decade, there is a serious decline in academic freedom, according to this report, but it is rejected by the Indian government. The Indian government questions the methodology, the intention and the parameters of this report. So please note, Free to Think is published by Scholars at Risk. So this concludes my discussion for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed the session and learnt all the key topics. And if you benefited from the session, please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow.